Good morning. I'm Sally Handley. Welcome to Mystery Book Club. And I'm going to immediately turn this over to John Shembra, our moderator.
Good morning, everyone.
Hello.
I don't need to go over my background, right? I think everybody was at the last one, so they pretty much know who the heck I am. So I'll dispense with that. Only thing I will say is I'm about halfway through my 9th book. Kind of hit a few roadblocks on that. Just you get in these situations where you just don't feel like writing, right? And I've been in that for about 3 weeks. So it's time to get busy again. But I got 35,000, almost 40,000 words done on it. So
That's a good start.
Anyway, today's book, Thonie Hevron, with due caution. Tony's a friend. She's in the public safety, and I've read all of her books, and she's a really excellent writer. Had a couple issues with this book that I'll ask you about. If you had any too, please let us know. But it's a good book. It's a good story. It's about human trafficking. Thonie Hevron has her main character is Meredith Ryan, and she works for a sheriff's department out of Petaluma, Rohnert Park area in Northern California. I thought the story was really good, but we can start off by did you all read the book?
Yes, I did.
I did.
Okay, well, most of you did, right? What did you think of the book overall? Let's just do a general kind of feeling of how the book went.
I thought it was a well-told story, and human trafficking is a very difficult topic because especially for a woman, it just presses all your buttons. When you read how these young girls are tricked into these situations. So I think one of the things the writer does really well is balance, how difficult the personal life of a police person is, balanced with the work life that they have and the relationships they have with friends and people as well. So I really like the book.
Good. Anybody else? You have any thoughts on the book?
I thought it was interesting. I liked the story, and I was interested in keeping on reading. There were a couple of things that I was more hesitant about, but I really did like it.
Good. Yeah, I liked the story too. I thought the story went real well. The only thing that I had an issue with was the chapters. I mean, there's a lot of chapters in this book that are a page or less. And to me, that made it difficult for me to stay in the story. You know what I mean? When you start reading, you get in the story. But because the chapter would end and then you'd pick up a new chapter with a different thought, but it was it seemed like a very abrupt changes going on all the time. And to me, that was difficult for me to stay in with the story. The story itself, I thought, was really good. Tony's a very clever writer. And I thought the story itself was very good. And I think for the most part, she handled it very well. There could have been a lot of things in there that were, I don't know how to say it, could have been very improper, to address issues, especially if she got really graphic, and she didn't. The hints were all there. We knew what she was talking about, but I liked it because she didn't get into a lot of graphic details, which I was glad to see. I mean, there was enough there, right, where you got the idea.
Yes.
But the chapters, I still can't get over the chapters. I'd read one. There were some that were only like 2 paragraphs long, and that was a chapter. And then we go to another chapter. And I felt that she could have blended that next chapter in with the first chapter because it was still related to the storyline she was doing, by just using a story break rather than making a new chapter on it. A minor thing, it just bugged the heck out of me. But
I don't even notice anymore because there are no real guidelines for chapters.
Right.
And every writer is doing it differently. What I used to think of as a scene within a chapter is often a chapter now. And
Yeah, I have to confess, that's how I write. And I like to write short chapters, and basically it's one scene. And I also like to read that. I don't know, it seems to me like when I finish a short chapter, I'm motivated to keep going on. Whereas if I've got like a 15-page chapter and I keep looking, am I almost finished? I'd like to stop reading at the chapter break. But if the chapter's 15, 20 pages long, it's difficult to do that sometimes. So
yeah,
I have the opposite attitude toward short chapters.
uh, exceptionally long chapters, I think, at least for me, does the same thing. And I started being analytical, and I really shouldn't. I should just read the darn book. But I can't help it. And I start thinking, well, they should have broken this up into like 3 chapters. My chapters of my books, I really don't pay much attention to the length, but I really seriously doubt if I have any chapters that are more than about 5 pages. So they're not overly long, they're not overly short. That's just like Sally said, it's just how you want to write your chapters. But for me, it was just a little bit off-putting. It seemed kind of a shock. I'd be into this chapter and I turn the page and it's a new chapter with a new thought sometimes. So it just, I don't know. I just didn't like it. That's just me, so I'll get
for
over it.
me, as long as I know who's in the scene and where it's happening, I like to know how it relates in time to the one before. But other than that,
Yeah, and Thonie did a good job on not losing sight of where the previous chapter had gone. It wasn't like there was this gigantic break and off on another tangent. The chapters were there and they were organized well and all that. It's just short chapters. Just I don't know why. It's just something in between is not firing on all cylinders, I guess.
How much of that is due to I think she has a publisher and an editor, so I wonder how much of that has to do with the way that they set her up.
Yeah, I was wondering that too. Thonie signed with Rough Edges Press. She signed a contract for 3 books about, I guess, 2 or 3 years ago, to write 3 books. And I don't think she's written all 3 of them yet. She may have written 2. But I think they have a lot to do with some other issues that I want to talk about on here that the publisher does. So
Well, I agree with what was said earlier, that she did a good job sort of addressing both the Meredith Ryan's family issues as well as Esme's family issues. And I thought it was interesting too, pointing out that children's services don't always have the best support.
no.
That oftentimes it is hard to find placement for a child in a kind of setting that they really need. So I thought that was a good point.
She did. I thought she did an excellent job on trying to handle your personal life along with the requirements of being a detective or a police officer. Because oftentimes in investigations, George Wood knows this very well, you work days on end and you don't take time off. You work long hours. You miss family get-togethers and dinners and even holidays. I don't know how many times I got called out when I was in investigations on a Christmas Day or a Thanksgiving, and I had to go to work. So it's tough to balance that. And I think Thonie did a great job on that. She shows the challenges that it is to balance your personal life with your professional life. And I thought she did a really good job on that. So, so I made a couple notes here. Oh, how did the structure of the book affect the story? And that's where I wrote about very short chapters. Even with the short chapters, it wasn't a jumping around thing. Like I said earlier, it wasn't that the one chapter would end and we'd be going off on another tangent. It was all part of the story. And I thought overall it flowed, very well. What did you think of the characters in there? Esme and her mother and the bad guys, Michael and all that. What did you think about them?
I thought she did a good job clearly defining the characters.
Mhm.
I did.
Given support to whatever their situation happened to be.
Mhm.
Yeah, my understanding of people who are real addicts is that they do lose sight of everything else except their next fix, and they will sell anybody when they're desperate. And I thought she showed it well, that even though she loved her daughter, the drug was stronger, the pull of it.
Yeah. She was caught in a situation she couldn't get out of on her own. Yeah, I agree. I thought Tony handled the emotional aspects of each of them, each of the different characters. They each had different emotions. They either combative or they were submissive or they were under the influence of drugs or frightened or whatever. And I think she did a really good job at that. The emotions that she put in the characters was proper, I think, for each of the characters that she had in there.
Yeah, the vulnerability of girls of that age to begin with in any circumstance is so apparent, but especially in this book, because this girl, she's taking on the responsibility that a parent should have. And, you're really so worried about this character from the start, but she was pretty smart. And once she realized the situation she'd gotten herself into, she knew she had to get out. And fortunately for her, her mother did get her out of there, which then got them to the police. And then it was great that she trusted the police person, because I think that was pretty important too. She had to trust the police person, and at the same time, no matter what her mother did, she wanted to know that her mother was going to be all right. And it was very very moving to follow that character's journey, because it was quite a difficult one.
Yeah. What did you think about the beginning of the book where she gets this call from the guy she put in prison that murdered her husband and her brother? That surprised me. I read the book before, the one where that happened, but here's this guy in prison for life, if not on death row, and he's calling on the police officer whose family he murdered for help. And I think she handled that very well. Their initial response was, up yours. The hell you talking to me about? But then he says something as she's kind of walking away from the interview. He said something that struck a nerve with her, I guess, because she turned around and came back. And then she said, I'll make some inquiries. And then look what that ended up being the book. So I thought the segue into that, how she got into the investigation, was very well handled.
I thought that character, the man in prison, I've forgotten his name, was good because he wasn't a terrible person like Fedorov was, but he did care in his way, and he had been a cop apparently, so he had some respect for her.
He saved her life. That's what he had on her. You own me is what it was about. But I think if it was maybe another situation, she wouldn't have felt as invested. But because it was a 13-year-old girl, she felt, that she wanted to do something, and so that's what, you know, pulled her, really reeled her in. But
Yeah.
he had saved her life, which is kind of like, you know, he killed everybody else, but
Yeah,
he saved her life.
Yeah.
In doing so, he was changing. I mean, he didn't want to do what he was doing, I guess.
Yeah, he showed emotion. Esparza, his name was Esparza, but he showed emotion in this talking to Meredith. You know, dropping his head, and you wouldn't expect that from a guy who was a multiple murderer. I mean, you wouldn't expect him to do that, but um, Ellis, I think he hit it right on the nose. He was showing some regret in his own way. And I think she recognized that too. So I think that might have been part of the reason. But I like the way that the beginning, the way she started it with this, starts right off with a bang where she's talking to this
Yeah.
murderer who also saved her life. I mean, what a dichotomy that is, right? You know,
Good opening, because it
yeah,
caught your attention.
I thought it was a great opening, you know, and you talk about openings, a lot of time there's just a lot of action going on, right? It's just, you know, chase or a shootout or, you know, a big fight or something. This shows you that you don't have to do that. You don't have to do that to have a good opening.
But something
because
has to be happening.
Yeah.
That matters.
And this one was great. You know, here she is talking to the guy that murdered her husband and her brother, saved her life. And the emotions that she was going through, I think she did a great job on that. So
I think it showed really an aspect of Meredith's character, the fact that he trusted her to bring this to her attention, and his niece also trusted her when she had the choice between, I forget the Roanoke Park or the other detective that she was working with, who really was a little off, but Esme definitely trusted Meredith more than the other ones. But there's something about the main character that people like and trust, even though she's very firm and direct about whatever it is she has to do.
Yeah.
People trust her.
And I thought she did a good job, continued doing a good job on showing how Meredith can be a real bulldog when it comes to her investigations. You know, she's dedicated, she's smart, and she's very determined. And that comes across in all her books. I don't know if you've read any of her other books, but in all of the books, that comes across. Her character development, I thought, in the book was really good. I felt really bad for poor little Esme, this little 13-year-old. I think she was 13 years old and just wise beyond her years, you know. And I've met in my career, I've met people like that. I mean, that's very true. I mean, it's very realistic. I'm sure George has met people like that too. The most ones that appear the most vulnerable are the ones that are really the strongest in the group. So, but somebody, I think, was it Ellis that mentioned it about Esme being so concerned through the whole book about her mother. And of course, she lived with her auntie, and she said she loves her auntie, but there were 9 people in the house, and it was time for something to change. And we find out that it does. At the end of the book, we found out that it does change for her. So let's see what else. Made a couple other little notes here. Oh, one of the questions I wanted to ask, are you inclined to read another one of Tony's books based on this one?
Yeah, I would.
Would you read another one?
I would. I haven't, but I would.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, I've read all of her books, and they're all very good. They're all very good. You can't go wrong with them.
She, you know, she's got a lot of characters, but I think we mentioned that early on, that, you know, like you have a clear picture of them. I never put the book down and picked it back up and go, wait, who's that? You know, who was that? You know who all these characters are. Another interesting character is Meredith's husband, because
yeah, Nick.
you know, at first, he doesn't want her to get involved with this. It's not her case. It's not in their
Right.
in her jurisdiction.
Yep.
And she, as you said, John, she is a bulldog, and she's not gonna back away from this when she knows this 13-year-old is in danger. But once the husband's fully on board, boy, he steps up for sure. So he was a really good guy, because their marriage experienced a lot of strains because, you know, she's working double time, working her own stuff, and then on this case as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. I mean, you know, it was not her case.
Right.
And she really didn't have jurisdiction. So there's a conundrum there where she kind of has to tiptoe around this, at least at the beginning. And then she becomes fully vested into it. But her friend, forget her name, was it Deb?
Deb,
Deb?
yeah.
There was something going on with her, and it made me wonder through the whole book. Damn it, she kept it to the very end. What was up with Deb? Because she kind of started to distance herself from the investigation, right?
I didn't like Deb much.
Yeah, I didn't either. The explanation, though, I was glad of the explanation, and I don't know if anybody's planning to read it here, so I don't want spoilers, but it worked out okay. The only thing I'll say about it is it wasn't that she was crooked. You know, she wasn't a corrupt cop that was causing that. So um, she had, like you said, she had a ton of characters in there. You know how I keep mine straight?
Score sheet.
I write it down because I won't remember 5 minutes later what the character's supposed to be. You know,
I have to
and
keep a list of the names and make sure
that's
they're
what I
not
do.
too similar.
Yeah.
She
I
did,
found myself mixing up the names too, uh, changing the names of one of the characters. I don't know why, in my brain something misfired. So this keeps me from doing it because in the book I'm writing now, the guy's last name is Mason, the bad guy. But somehow I interchanged his name with the detective's name, one of the detectives. So now I've got a detective Jameson and the bad guy Jameson. I got about halfway through and I noticed that and I went, oh crap, you know. Well, it's easy enough to change, right? It's easy enough to change. But so I write them down. You know, I write them down. I write down the addresses of the police departments that I'm dealing with. I'll write down a short description because I go to Google Maps and I look at it, right? So I can get
That's
it accurate.
wonderful. I love
Yeah,
Google Maps.
I do too.
And the
So,
street view where you can see what's on the street and get a feel for
yeah,
the neighborhood and things.
it's really cool too because you can scan, you know, you can scan different angles with Google's map. You can get one straight on, you can get one from the side, above, behind. Um, and I'm really a stickler on accuracy when I do some of these things. I do a lot of research on it, but it has to be accurate because somebody out there, maybe hopefully more than one person, is going to be familiar with the things that the author writes, locations and that.
And we'll
And I
let
mean,
you know.
yeah, and they let you know. And you know, we're writing, at least I am, I'm writing fiction, so I can build the world I want to build, right? I don't have to have real places. But a lot of my stuff takes place in San Francisco, so I research uh, places that police officers frequent in San Francisco, the deli that they go to, the coffee shop, and I put them in there, you know, in the areas. And I've gotten comments from people. They said, "Hey, I go to that coffee shop every day." So I'd like to have mine realistic, but you don't have to. Like in this book, she talks about all these places, Rohnert Park, and she talks about the college that's there and the different streets. So I've been all through that area many times. My niece went to college there in Rohnert Park at the state college there. So I've been up there many times. So I'm familiar with the area. So when I'm reading it, excuse me, when I'm reading it, I can see the area. I can see it, and it's better than just trying to tell about what it looks like. I can actually see it. So that's one of the reasons that I like to do that kind of research. And Thonie is she lives in Petaluma, by the way, so she's very familiar with that whole area, the sheriff's office and the hills and everything. And she records it well. She records it well. So, all right. What did you think of the cover? Is that backwards for you? It's backwards for
No,
me.
No, it's good.
Okay.
It was okay.
Move it in.
Yeah, it was okay.
Can you tell me what the book's about by looking at this cover?
No.
Well, I can say it doesn't look like it's going to be a cozy.
That's true. But the Jeep in this one is one of the cars the bad guys use. That's the only connection that has to the
Yeah.
story.
I thought when I read what he was driving, I wondered, it didn't seem important enough, but
Yeah.
for the cover, but it was probably a good photograph that she had access to.
Yeah. I don't know if her publisher suggested the cover, but let me find her bookmark. What did I do with it? All her books have cars on it, like that one oh, here we go, right in front of me. All of her books have covers like that. Okay, if you can see them. Okay, they're all the same thing. They're just different cars. And none of them really gives you a hint of what the story's about. And I'm a firm believer, and I mentioned this last session, that the title's got to be eye-catching, give you a hint of what the story's about. The cover art, the same thing. Has to be, at least in my mind, it has to give you a hint of what the story's about, to pique the reader's interest when they first look at it. And then there's the back cover blurb. So I don't really think those are the most effective covers that she could have come up with. Sorry, Thonie. I love you.
But it does create a consistent identity for the
It
author.
does make it a series.
It does.
Are they
And
all about the same characters?
Meredith Ryan, yeah, the detective. They're all about her.
It's a graphic consistency. Graphic designers, I find, and like people who are behind picking those things, especially if they're not the writer, they're not the author. They have their own way of thinking, and to me, it's the consistency of the typeface and the picture, even if it doesn't make any sense to us. It doesn't really convey what's inside.
Some of you know Marilyn Meredith? I mean, she's like the grand dame of public safety. She's written close to 50 books. She's like 87, 88 now. And she switched publishers, and their covers, I don't have an example of them, but they're very similar. A lot of them have Native American art on them. She puts her character in the foothills of California, and it's right near a Native American reservation. Her character is Native American. So a lot of the covers, all of the covers, most of them are Native American art, and they're very eye-catching, I think. But it's the same thing, Sally, like you said, it's a consistency.
Yeah.
I just think they could have picked something better to be consistent about than cars driving, because the cars don't really relate that much to the story. You look at the cover and say, what are they going to get in this terrific chase? No, that doesn't happen. So it makes me wonder.
I mean, there's no hint that it's a police story, which is, I think, one of the things, having met and got acquainted through, I don't know, where did I start with my first connection to PSWA? I have read books written by police, and I think one of the things that struck me. Twice she quoted, she said these quotes, that being a cop, let's see if I can get back to it. Police officers worked long hours of boredom, punctuated by moments of sheer terror.
Yeah.
And I that is one thing that I find in common with books written by police, that has been eye-opening for me. It is, and I know, George, your book, Robbers and Cops, when we talked about it, it's these hours of doing the most mundane, awful legwork and research to find the criminal. And then, of course, I read the nonfiction book, Murder in Malden. I can't think of, I interviewed him. He's a member also, but
Bill
Bill Pax, right, book. And the sheer number of people it takes to catch a criminal and convict them is it's astounding. It's just astounding. And how many people have to work together, and in many instances, like, chance plays such a big role in finding a criminal, and finding out who did it. I mean, in this book, there was a little bit of that too, because this guy was moving around, and again, you really didn't know that the drug dealer, how this all, I mean, we knew how it all connected, but the police didn't at first know that this drug dealer was involved with Esme, right? So it's just, it's very interesting to read how the challenges that police people face, and how difficult the job is to actually catch somebody and put them in jail.
And the drug dealer
Right.
was actually related to his brother, ran a bigger drug ring.
Right.
So,
Right.
which they
Yeah, there
were
was a little-
actually following the older brother.
Yeah, there's kind of like a drug dealer competition going on, going on there. Yeah, but you're right. I mean, it's hours and hours and hours of just sitting at the computer, or just going door to door, or looking, going to a crime scene and looking for the cameras maybe that are around, talking to people, reviewing closed circuit video. It can be very, very tedious. But it seems like you get that one little bit of information that tends to break the case. And that makes you feel good. So, but yeah, she did a good job on that. I mean, and it got a little frenetic in there, because there were times when they didn't have enough information, and oh God, we got to go get Esme, or we got to go get Teresa and look for her. Thonie created drama in there, I think, and tension in there too, and she's done that in all her books too. She's very good at that. So you can see, I like her writing. So,
It's a
thought
lot
one
more
thing-
suspense. It's full of suspense. I'm sorry, Ellen.
right.
Oh, I was just gonna say, one thing I especially liked, even though she had a lot of characters, you always knew that it was about Meredith, and she showed enough of Meredith's personality and emotions that you cared about her. I started, let me say, a book by an author that's fairly well known, but I've read 4 chapters and I'm not sure who the main character is.
Oh,
There are so many characters, and they may be connected later, but it's just hopping. I doubt if I'll finish it.
yeah, I've run into that too. Some of my favorite authors, one of my favorite authors used to be Patterson, but now he just sells his name for the cover. He's not really writing his own books. He's got ghostwriters, and they aren't nearly of the same quality as his writing. So I haven't read a James Patterson book in several years, because it's not him writing it. Lee Childs, the same thing. His brother assists him and writes. The two of them write. And boy, I'll tell you, you can tell, or I can tell, when Lee's writing stops and his brother's writing starts. They're totally different writers. So it's just, just everybody writes differently. Everybody likes things differently. But there's got to be consistency through the whole book. And I think Thonie did that very well. It was consistent. I don't think there was ever an instant in the book where I got lost. And I said, well, what's going on here? And have to go back a few pages. That didn't happen. And that happens more often than I like to think in other books that I've read. Guys that sell millions of copies of books, because they sell millions of copies doesn't make them the best expert in writing. I don't know if any of you've ever read Stephen King's book on writing.
Yes.
Yes.
He wrote a book
My
on writing.
Bible.
Yeah, I really like it. And the part in there that kind of makes me smile is he says, when you go through and, I'm paraphrasing here. When you do your first rewrite, he says, get rid of a lot of the adjectives that you have in there, adverbs, that you have in there, the ly words. He said, then go through again and get rid of the other ones. He hates them. But if you read Stephen King, they're in his books. I mean, there's not a lot of them, but he does use them.
I want to write an article. I want to write an article on, an ode to the much maligned adverb. I don't understand why people say that. I love adverbs. I use them.
I do too. It's just that, I've read books where every other word is an adverb, and I mean that is annoying and unnecessary. But I think they serve a purpose.
Right.
I think to. Go ahead, Ellis. Sorry.
One of the problems with adverbs is that beginning writers, instead of trying to create a picture, they're telling you by saying, she said angrily, he said with a smile. That's not an adverb, but it's constantly telling you what is going on instead of letting you see it.
Right.
Or pick it up from the whole picture.
Yeah. I think Thonie did a great job in describing the scenes, different scenes that she was at. And everybody says, and one of the cardinal rules is, show, don't tell, right? And I think she did a good job at that, too. As I've read some where they just blather on for 4 or 5 pages about where they are. And that's when I'm turning the pages, because I don't want to read that.
James Lee Burke can make it good, but not very many people.
Yeah, I want them to show me so that I can see the where they are, what the scene is, the building or the room or the forest or whatever it may be. And I think she did. Go ahead, Sally.
I was just going to say, one of the spots that I thought was extremely suspenseful and had me like on edge was when she went to the house. This is now towards the end, where they know that that's where everybody's holed up.
Yeah.
And she realizes about what's going on in the shed.
Mm-hmm.
When she gets out of the car, I'm thinking, don't get out of the car, stay in the car, and because I just was so fearful for her at that time. And I mean, that required such bravery, I think, to get out. And, she knew somebody was in distress and needed help, but I just, and that was, yeah, I could see that scene. I could picture the street. I could picture, like her going over to the shed. And I just, I would, as you could tell, I would have been running in the other direction, I'm not, I would never have made a good police person for sure.
There's procedures and training and how you're supposed to handle stuff. But sometimes you get in situations where that's got to go out the window because the urgency of the situation negates the training, that you're supposed to do this, wait for your backup. There's times you can't wait for your backup. because somebody's going to get hurt or killed, or, something bad's going to happen unless you act. Hopefully it's not, they don't, the officer doesn't make a habit of it. But if you remember in Steve Ditmar's book, the Big Dogs books, the lieutenant that had the dog got shot at the start of the thing because he didn't do the right thing. Now that was a mistake on his part. His attention was diverted, and the guy got the drop on him, shot him, and he almost died. Stuff like that does happen, but you've got to. Sometimes you just have to take action. There was a guy that was holed up in his house in Pleasant Hill. He took himself hostage. His only hostage was him, but he did have a gun. I could see through the window, the kitchen window, him sitting at the kitchen table, and he had this gigantic, buntline special pistol on the table. And he was threatening suicide. He'd bring the gun up to his head. He didn't know that I was watching him through the window, but he'd bring the gun up to his head and cock the hammer, and then he'd put it back down. And we thought this guy was really serious about it, and there was a real danger he was going to commit suicide. And we weren't going to go in guns blazing. I mean, the guy obviously had a mental issue, but I did have two officers go around the back, one of them a SWAT officer, and luckily the back door was unlocked. They could make access to the house without him knowing. And to help, I knocked on the window, and he looked over and saw me. And so his attention was at me while they came in and grabbed him and the gun, and we got him out. He went to the hospital under a mental thing, and everything worked out okay. But my lieutenant wasn't happy with me. Because what are you doing approaching the house? He could have, well, somebody had to do something to rectify this situation, and it worked out just fine. Yeah, it could have gone sideways, but sometimes you just have to break the rules a bit or the procedures. And she did that. Meredith actually did that when that scene that you're talking about at the shed there. I thought the same thing. She radioed for help. If I remember right, she asked for help, but she didn't wait for them to get there. And I thought, oh God, this could go sideways, but it didn't. So everything that Thonie wrote in this book, I'm rah-rah for Thonie because I really like her writing. Was very realistic from a former police officer's point of view. It was very realistic, and she handled that well. Even the parts where she was home with her husband and they were cooking dinner and just chit-chatting at home. You switch off being a police officer to being a wife or a husband or a father or whatever it may be when you get home. And Thonie knows that well, and she did a good job on it. So was there anything in there that you would have changed in the story that you didn't like where that part went?
No, it had a happy ending. So I'm all about happy endings.
Yeah. Yeah, I felt I felt the same way. There wasn't anything in there that I thought needed to be changed. It was a good story. It was well written.
I think the foster family bit was made to appear very simple, and it's not. So
yeah, it was simplified a bit, but it was the end of the book, so what the heck, right? Excuse me.
For your happy ending, Sally.
What about the length of the book? Was it a proper length? Too long? Too short? Whatever.
It was good.
It's okay with me.
Yeah,
I thought so too. I just read a book by Jeffrey Deaver. It's called Phantoms. There were probably 50 pages that I bypassed in that book because it didn't really add to the story. It was just word salads, it was just filler, and it really didn't do anything. And I didn't see any of that in Thonie's. But I tend to do that with other books too. If the author starts rambling on and rambling on and rambling on, I don't read it because it doesn't affect the story. it doesn't affect the outcome. It doesn't affect anything. But I didn't see any of that in Thonie's. She kept the story moving well. I thought it flowed well. She built good tension. I mentioned that before. She built the tension and then brought you down and then built the tension again. So overall, I really enjoyed her book. Let's see, what do we got going here? Okay, about 9:45, so we still got time. That's good. Check my notes real quick.
I have one quote, one that I highlighted, and I'd like to hear from you. We've got like 4 police people here, 5 police people. This was early in the book. She said the department had suffered an unusual exodus of experienced officers moving to larger agencies or out of law enforcement altogether. It was a tough time to be in law enforcement. Being shorthanded meant fewer open cases were solved. I'm not sure about the time, but can you speak to that? Like when would that have been? Or is that always that police departments experience that?
Well, I think it's not always. It ebbs and it flows, and it ebbs and it flows. You get fully staffed, and then BART PD comes along with much better pay, much better benefits, and siphons off, 10% of your officers. But then you refill those and it goes back. But I think I retired in 2001 and the staffing issues weren't really concerning at that time. But now they are. I mean, you look at some of the police departments in the Bay Area, they're 200 officers down from what they're supposed to have, and they can't fill those positions because either the money's cut or they're not getting enough qualified applicants. I think that too will pass eventually, and they'll start filling them up. But then again, it's going to hit the apex, and I think it's going to drop off. George, San Leandro PD, did you notice that when you were with them?
I've noticed it right now because I've stayed in close touch. The department has, and it really plays into what you were asking, Sally. The department has 90 some odd authorized. They have 60 current officers. They're paying officers who are eligible to retire an extra $5,000 a month to stay. That's a lot of money. They've eliminated their traffic unit, training. There's like 6 units that they don't know, bicycle, homeless outreach, things like that. So it's pretty tough. And John mentioned BART. I got siphoned off by BART for 9 months. Right now, there is like Torrance Police Department is paying up to $100,000 cash for lateral transfers. So it is a major problem, and it's something that I'm looking forward to seeing how Thonie handles it.
Yeah,
I think that's related also to the whole discussion about defunding departments, even though I think a lot of people don't understand the term, but they hear defund and they think police aren't what they don't honor them or respect them in the way that they once did. And it's not attractive to bring people in if you know you're going to be, criticized.
An unfortunate term. I think they made a real mistake with calling it defunding. That's not what it should be at all.
No, but a lot of people
not what most of them meant. But it's
right. And thank you. I think you hit it right on the nose. It's not defunding to get rid of the police department type thing, but that's what they hear when they hear defund. No, it's getting rid of specialized things like the DARE program, motor officers, canine, that the department doesn't have the money to fully fund anymore.
Darlene, you were going to say something.
Yes, here in New York, there's always been an exodus by the New York City police to Long Island. Not just because our pay is better out here, but also because of what Peg hit on. The support of the community is behind the police on Long Island. and they're very law-abiding citizens. In the city, we used to laugh. This one DA, they said he could indict a ham sandwich, and they are not supportive of their police at all. Well, I shouldn't say at all, for the most part. And that's a serious problem because things happen, beyond your control, and all of a sudden you're condemned, and you did the right thing. So it makes it very difficult, and there's very few police, I don't know of any, that go the other way into the city when they're on the job here.
Mm.
Yeah.
Plus, we're more community oriented, which is also, I think, what a lot of people don't understand about some of the smaller departments. And they look at the bigger city departments and they're rolling from one call to another. These guys don't have a choice. But out here, we're able to actually do community policing. We help in matters that people have no idea about. They just think of brunt force, but it's so much more than that.
Yeah. Even in the town I was in Pleasant Hill, there's only 26,000 people, right? It's a very small town. Well, it's 30,000 now. But the police budget was the biggest chunk of money out of the city's budget plan. They paid the most for the police, and we only had, with the chief included, 42 officers. Chief, captain, 2 lieutenants, bunch of sergeants, and the rest patrol. We did have a canine at one time, but it only lasted a year as they couldn't afford it. They didn't have the money for it. We had 3 motor officers, which eventually got pared down to 1 because of the money. So, Thonie was absolutely right. I mean, we all know that quote that she put in there that you mentioned, Sally. We all know that as police officers. There just never seems to be enough money. And then again, I don't think a lot of times that the money is properly allocated, but who am I to say,
But then it goes back to why Meredith got involved in this case in the first place. This, the man who was in prison reached out to her because how much police time could get devoted to finding this one 13-year-old girl who was not a person of any importance, whose family wasn't important, whose mother was a druggie. He knew that nobody was going to put in the effort required to find that girl. She was only important to her uncle and to the aunt.
I thought exactly. And I thought it was interesting that when he was talking with Meredith, she said, well, why didn't you just go to the authorities or whatever, whatever. He said, because I wanted somebody I trust.
Yeah.
He trusts the person whose family he murdered. That was a real, that was kind of an eye opener for me, but I thought it was a terrific way to approach it. I thought that was wonderful. He trusts her,
But
even though she put him in prison for life.
It's true, though, isn't it, that there are some really good cops, many of them, but some of their informants and people are those that they've arrested, but they do trust them to be fair and to deal with them fairly. Yeah,
that's true. That's true. Sometimes you see the too often, I think, cops tend to see the seedier parts of life, the bad parts. Comes with the job. But there are times when there's that ray of light, when you really get into helping somebody and you've really helped them. And I think that's what drives Meredith. She has this, I got to get there. I got to do this. I got to help this person. She's not doing it for herself. She's not doing it, because it would be a big case. In fact, she's not even supposed to be investigating it. But she just has this feeling of urgency to help this child get out of that life, save this child. So, all in all, go ahead.
it's true that, you know, she really painted the hopelessness of the situation, because if that girl got into the clutches of this Russian pimp, they could have moved her around anywhere. They never would have found that girl. Never.
Yeah.
And there really was a very short window of opportunity for them to do anything to get her back. And when you read about, I mean, reading about this story it just hits home about, you know, how these young girls can get tricked into these situations. Although I have to say, I really enjoyed the fact that was it Sophia? Was the girl who was organizing everything for the Russian?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
she turned on him in a heartbeat, and
Boy,
that
did she.
that was just justice, wasn't it?
Right. And it's realistic, you know, you find the weakest link, and that's the one you want to go after, because I mean they just crumble. And then they're a wealth of information. Like Sophia could have given up that whole organization, which apparently she was, because now other agencies were getting involved.
But she
But you're
didn't, but she didn't do
absolutely
it. She didn't do it until he turned on her.
right.
Yeah. She was
Yeah.
in love and really believed all his lies.
I know,
she
you know, she
wanted
kept
to.
telling, you know, even when she was, you know, trying to get away from him and saying, I'm not going to do it anymore, she tells him that she loves him, you know, Michael, you know, and it's just, I don't know, it's just, it was just well done. So,
Yeah, because I mean, these guys are masterful at convincing these girls that they're special and that they're gonna, you know, they're gonna take care of them, and they're really good at it. And then if they don't stay in line, then they're violent with them, which, you know, like really, then they've got nowhere to turn.
right, right,
It's too late.
yep. Yeah, they do that. They're master manipulators. And you know, like in a lot of books, I think this one included, they hold the drugs over them. You know,
Mhm.
I'm going to be a supplier, and if you don't do what I say, you're not getting them. And these poor people, you know, they're hooked on it. They need it, so they become compliant.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing, but all the things that we've talked about in here, I think, are in Tony's book. I mean, she's covered everything very well. So how are we doing on time, Sally? Are we?
We have just about 3 or 4 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's 12:56. So you're going to give us a preview of what I've started reading, Southern Justice. Yeah.
Okay. Um, did I tell you what happened with Southern Justice?
No.
I wrote the book, and you know, it got published and everything, and a bunch of people bought it. Nobody told me about what happened in the book, where they had two paragraphs, the same, 9 pages apart. I started off a chapter with this one, and for somehow it got started off the same exact chapters, started off on the other one. And finally, somebody who read my book said, "Hey, do you know that this is in there?" Jeez, no, you know, the whole year went by, but it's been corrected now. Are we doing Southern Justice or are we doing the list?
Oh, I
thought
don't
it
know.
was the list.
Oh, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
we're doing the list.
I thought
I
it was.
started reading Southern Justice, so I'll have to. Okay. I'm glad I said that. I think I was ready and I had read the wrong book. The
Yeah.
list. Okay.
So this is, and I say it with all humility, the best book of the three that we're doing. Rah, rah. I had a lot of fun writing that one, because if I don't know if you've read it yet or not, if you're going to read it or whatever, but real quickly, years and years and years ago, 150 years ago, there were tunnels all through San Francisco, mainly from Chinatown. The Chinese gangs that used them. They're all gone now. There's short sections here and there. So I resurrected the tunnels. I cleaned them out and everything, and now they're back in there. And that's where my bad guy spends a lot of his time. And I thought that would make a good idea. You know, he can, a good way to, that was so cool. Patty got up and walked away and just disappeared. Because she has that background there.
Vanished.
She just walked and disappeared, walked right through the wall. But anyway, I hope you liked the book. I'm looking forward to your comments. Good or bad, doesn't matter. Don't forget, I was a cop for 30 years, so I don't get insulted. I have a very, very thick skin. So you don't pull your punches if there's something you don't like, because I learn from these things too. So next time we'll be doing the list. It's about a serial killer in San Francisco. He's going after a targeted group of people. I won't tell you any more than that. And he's using some of the tunnels under San Francisco to dispose of bodies and to get through different places. And I made this a multi-state investigation. He leaves the state of California to go after one of his victims. And Vince Torelli is hot on his tail at that point. I really like that one. I feel it's one of my best works. I'd put The List #1 and Retribution, the other book I wrote, that was my second book, I think, as my top two, with Southern Justice right in there, and hopefully the one I'm writing. So anyway, enjoy the book, I hope, and we'll see you in a month.
Wait, can I add a comment?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was in John's critique book when he wrote both those books. And in the list, there's a lot of emotional impact. There's a lot of things where it draws you in and frightens you. It's a real interesting book, twists and turns, and I guarantee you that when you find out what's happening, you will be shocked.
So I shouldn't
Thank
be
you.
reading this right before bed, right?
Yeah. No, the book I'm writing now, you don't want to read before bed, because a lot
Okay.
happens. Him creeping in houses and stuff. No.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you, Sally. Thanks for the opportunity, and we'll be back in a month with
Thank
our
you.
third and final chapter.
Thank you.
Bye.
You're welcome.
Enjoyed it.
My pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Nice.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Nice seeing you, George. Next time I'm up in Sacramento, I'll look you up. I know. Thank you.